Good morning. Our prelude today is number 20, Be Thou My Vision.
Welcome to worship this morning at First Unitarian Church of Orlando. I'm John Brockman, a member of the worship team. We bring you welcoming words today from Meg Barnhouse, titled The Beauty of the Whole. We gather to worship, our hearts alive with hope that here we will truly be seen, that here we will be welcomed into the garden of this community, where the simple and the elegant, the fluted and the frilled, the shy and the dramatic complement one another and are treasured. May we know that here each contributes in their way to the beauty of the whole. Come, let us worship together, all genders, sexualities, politics, the clappers and the non-clappers, the progressives or the conservatives. May we root ourselves in the values of this faith: compassion, courage, transcendence, justice, and transformation. For more information on our congregation, go to www.orlandouu.org or email welcometeam@orlandouu.org. After the service today at 11:30, all are invited to informal fellowship to gather with each other and chat for about 20 minutes. If you're new here and have questions about our congregation, you'll enjoy our Welcome Center. This morning, we have a brief announcement from our Settled Minister Search Committee.
Greetings, beloved congregation. Sandy Pollock here from the Ministerial Search Committee. We just wanted to give you a brief check-in to let you know we're alive and well. We're diligently moving forward in the discernment phase of our task. All of this is confidential, so there's really no details to share yet, but the next few months will go by quickly. We're sure of that. Please know that we are loving our work and we are loving working together. We only wish we could be doing it in the flesh instead of on the Zoom, but we know that time will come too. So know that we appreciate all your support and gratitude as we forge ahead in choosing the best minister for First Unitarian Church. In the meantime, take care and keep yourselves and your loved ones safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Here at 1U, we have many activities online through the week. As a community, we're engaged in many diverse ministries, so it's important that we financially sustain our community to do its work in the world. Personally, 1U is a home away from home for me. I couldn't think of having it or not having it in my life. And the missions that we support when we go out into the greater community are also very important to me, from LGBTQ support to the homeless, to our youth, to the greater justice in general. 1U has a big part. So if you'd like to make a gift to support the many ministries of this congregation, go to orlandouu.org and click the Donate button in the upper right corner. You can also send a text or send a check. Remember, each month we also give to benefit a partner organization that provides important services to those in our wider community in our Share the Plate program. In January, we are giving to Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. To give to Share the Plate, use the donate link on our website, send a check to the church, or a text noting Share the Plate in the text or on the check. It's good to be together again. Welcome to Sunday Worship.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
This last week, a few days ago, we were privileged to hear in the presidential inauguration a powerful new poem from our first National Youth Poet Laureate, Amanda Gorman. I borrow a few of her lines this morning for the call to worship. She said, "When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, just unfinished." Unfinished, she suggests. A nation, a world, a reality that is unfinished, that is still in process. On this morning, come, gather our spirits, and let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Vaccaro.
And I'm Linda Piantieri. Together, we recently planted 1U's new flower garden on the south side of the RE complex.
Unitarian Universalists light a chalice at the beginning of worship to set aside, this time, as sacred time. Please say with us our familiar words. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share.
Good morning, all. It's lovely to be with you here this beautiful morning. I'm pre-recording this from my home, so I have no idea if it's actually a beautiful morning on this Sunday, but wishful thinking. It's certainly beautiful right now here on Wednesday afternoon. So no matter what the weather is actually doing right now, the world is still a beautiful place. From my vantage point here in my home, I can see my yard behind me, the lemon tree. You might see some cardinals flitting back and forth between the tree and the bird feeders. If you're really lucky, you'll see some cranes sauntering up from the pond to come eat the seeds that the cardinals left behind. All right here in my yard. All these parts of my own little world here are interconnected. The yard, the tree, the cardinals, the birdseed, the cranes, the pond, all parts to a single whole, all impacting and changing one another. And that's what our story today is all about. So join Heather Coddington, our nursery coordinator, as she shares a story about how all these pieces of our world lead to and impact one another.
Today we're reading Draw Me a Star by Eric Carle. Draw me a star, and the artist drew a star. It was a good star. Draw me the sun, said the star, and the artist drew the sun. It was a warm sun. Draw me a tree, said the sun, and the artist drew a tree. It was a lovely tree. Draw me a woman and a man, and the artist drew a handsome couple. Draw us a house, said the couple, and the artist drew a house. It was a strong house. Draw me a dog, said the house, and the artist drew a dog. It was a big dog. Draw me a cat, said the dog. Draw me a bird, said the cat. Draw me a butterfly, said the bird. Draw me a flower, said the butterfly, and the artist drew red and yellow and blue and purple flowers. Draw us a cloud, said the flowers, and the artist drew clouds heavy with rain. Draw me the night, said the rainbow, and the artist drew a dark night. Draw me the moon, said the night, and the artist drew a full moon. Draw me a star, said the moon. It was a good star. Hold on to me, said the star to the artist. Then together they traveled across the night sky. I hope you enjoyed our story today. We'll see you next time.
We enter a time of mindfulness, of meditation and prayer. And as always, we begin with the hearing of the joys and concerns in our congregation and in the world. In our congregation this morning, we remember those who were ill and injured. Dale reports that her daughter Rachel has been diagnosed with COVID. And Jenny's mother in Kansas City has broken her hip, and Jenny will be going there shortly to help care for her. For both of these families, we pray for flexibility, sustenance, as they begin the healing process. And of course, we remember our nation at this time of the beginning of a new administration. We are hopeful for new paths and mindful of the work ahead. As always, we remember the unspoken concerns in our lives. And we know that the light of the sacred shines into the dark and broken places of our lives and all life. And now let's take a deep and cleansing breath. Mindful that in this simple act we declare our interdependence with each other and with all. So now let's sing to open our hearts.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
When we go into the silence, please use either Facebook comments or Zoom chat to name anyone in your life who needs prayer, remembering, or honoring in our communion of names. We begin with a meditation, a poem from Maya Angelou, part of her famous work at the inauguration of President Bill Clinton in 1993 on the pulse of mourning. Then a prayer from the Reverend Ted Loder, a retired United Methodist clergyman. I chose both the poem and the prayer as both reflective of themes in this morning's sermon and reflective of where we are as a nation standing on the cusp of another day. For Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes. Upon this day breaking for you, give birth again to the dream. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. And the prayer from Ted Loder. Gracious God, by your mercy, restore the circle of humanity we have broken by our acts and attitudes of exclusion and indifference, our timid collusion in the unraveling of community, and the spiraling down of our common society into the pursuit of merely personal, private, even pious goals. O God of our noblest dreams and deepest hopes, restore in us clean hearts, right minds, a glad resolve to help remold the soul of our time, to rejoin the private lives of each of us to the public life of all of us and the promise of your kingdom. so shall we be mercifully set free to join in healing the broken heart and broken circle of your human family, and find our lives stretched to joyful proportions by the stunning grace of love.
I am here to tell you we may never meet again. Simple, really, isn't it? A word or two and then a lifetime of not knowing where or how or why or when you think of me or speak of me and wonder what befell someone you once loved so long ago so well. Ever wonder what I'll feel as living shuffles by? You don't have to ask me, and I need not reply. Every moment of my life from now until I die, I will think or dream of you and fail to understand how a perfect love can be confounded out of hand. Is it written in the stars? Are we paying for some crime? Is that all that we are good for? Just a stretch of mortal time? Is this God's experiment in which we have no say, in which we're given paradise, but only for today? Can nothing be altered? Is there nothing to decide? No escape, no change of heart, nor any place to hide. Love is all I'll ever want, but can I be denied? Sometimes in my darkest thoughts I wish I never learned what it is to be in love and have that love returned. Is it written in the stars? Are we paying for some crime? Is that all that we are good for? Just a stretch of mortal time? Is this God's experiment in which we have no say, in which we're given paradise, but only for today? Is this God's experiment in which we have no say, in which we're given paradise, but only for today?
I was born and raised on the plains of Lubbock, Texas, on the Great Plains that extends from Texas up to the Dakotas and on up into Canada. The Great Plains, if you've ever been on them, are as flat as a pancake almost. In the country, you can see for miles and miles. The sky is huge. It's the big sky in Texas. The land is more bare. There's not much vegetation or trees. It makes the sky look big, and it makes the landscape look desolate to some. But it was what I knew growing up. I learned a lot under those skies as a kid. I learned to see for miles and miles. I learned to value water, which was in shorter supply in that semi-arid climate. I learned to value the color and scent of flowers and the verdancy of plants, which were spare and were often largely introduced from other parts of the country. I learned to value the ingenuity of humanity as they carefully farmed those lands to grow crops, even in that spare environment, especially cotton. Lubbock was the main exporter of cotton in all the world, they told me as a kid. I learned to value the pioneer history of that area, those who settled there and formed community out of, well, almost out of nothing, it seemed. But a city grew there on these flat plains of Lubbock, Texas. Later in life, as I traveled more around the country, I realized how spare was the landscape of my childhood and youth. In the Berkshire Mountains of New England during the height of fall colors, in the rolling verdant hills of Wisconsin, and in so many other places I discovered a natural lushness and beauty that I had only seen in books before. But in my heart, it didn't measure, in my mind, to that flat, desolate landscape of West Texas. I learned that I loved that landscape and actually, and perhaps it sounds odd, felt more protected under its big sky, on its flat landscape, looking out on the open prairie than I did in any other place I've been to. And on that prairie and under that sky, I learned a lot about God. The open quality of the land was a canvas inviting my imagination to figure out how in the world all of this came into being, how I came into being, what was my purpose in life, what was our purpose in life. Many people have such lofty thoughts and feel the intuitions of the sacred in more lush surroundings. I found the sacred among the spare canvas of West Texas. I grew up outside the church, non-religious, which seemed to be a rarity in those days. If we had a church, it was Alcoholics Anonymous. My father had been a longtime member. And in my teenage years, I joined the Alateen program of that group. It was for teenagers of alcoholic parents. The 12-step program for us provided a discipline for dealing with living with an alcoholic, for being responsible for our own lives, and by helping each other through the sharing of that common experience. Out of all that work came a belief, as one of the 12 steps says, that, quote, a power greater than ourselves would restore us to sanity. And a decision in another step to, quote, give our lives to the care of the God of our understanding. Now, in all this God talk, and I do understand that some of you are getting tired of God talk, but this morning I've got a purpose for it, not that I don't on other mornings. I want you to know it wasn't just a belief about God. It was an experience of God, especially as a teenager in the Alateen program. Now, not always. I can't say I always felt the presence of the sacred. I learned very early in life that God was not always there for me as if on speed dial, that God was often and too often silent in my life. But God would appear, the Holy would appear for me in many guises, in surprising ways at times, in nature as I've recounted, in relationships, in ideas, in poetry, and especially in music. Now, granted, my theology was not very well thought out. It certainly wasn't systematic. As I grew up, my childish faith also needed to grow up. I grew up and faced a world full of adult problems, and so my simplistic faith needed to mature as well. Obviously, I eventually found Unitarian Universalism, and among the many ideas I encountered there was a branch of theology and philosophy I had never heard of before, process theology. What in the world is process theology? There are two important philosophers in the development of process theology. The first is Alfred North Whitehead, British mathematician and philosopher, who published Process and Reality in 1929. In that rather large work, he laid out a very complex metaphysics which departed radically from most of Western philosophy. Whitehead said reality consists of processes, not so much material objects. He said these processes interacted with other processes, so everything is connected and interconnected. Reality is not, he said, therefore defined as bits of independent matter. Then about a generation later, American philosopher Charles Hartshorne comes along, took Whitehead's work, and improvised upon it. Now, notably, Hartshorne, to us, is important as he became a Unitarian Universalist later in his life, at First Unitarian Universalist in Austin, Texas. One of his later teaching posts was there at the University of Texas in Austin. Both Whitehead and Hartshorne said that God is present in all situations and processes, but doesn't control those processes. That was the important part. God is persuader. Humans have the freedom to do what they want, for better or worse. God is always there, total and complete love, peace, truth, and justice, saying in subtle ways, come over here, cajoling us in intuition and in various ways to do what we should be doing to build up beloved community in the world. But nothing God does gets in the way of human freedom. So, that is to say, that God is affected by temporal processes, that human freedom trumps God's will. Though God remains eternal in this line of thought, God never dies, and immutable, God is unchangeably good, it's in the area of traditional divine omnipotence that process theology really has some radical things to say. In traditional theology, God is omnipotent, has unlimited power. A lot of us, I think of traditional theology of believing that God is separate from creation, sitting on a cloud, controlling everything as a puppeteer might. Process theology takes a radically different point of view. One of Hartshorne's best works is also one of his more accessible works, called Omnipotence and Other Theological Mistakes. And as you can tell from that title, Hartshorne has some different ideas. In Hartshorne's mind and in process theology generally, God doesn't control everything. God doesn't even know what is the end of history because God cannot predict the future because the future hasn't happened yet. If God could know what happens in the future, then that would be to say that everything is predestined, and in process theology, nothing is predestined. Everything is centered on human agency and human will. So what happens in history is determined in large part by what humans do, how humans respond. So in a sense, humans can change God. That is to say, human ingenuity is always presenting new goodness and new tragedy and evil in the world, which affects God. So we humans are always in the process of creating and recreating. We're always in the process of becoming. In that road, of course, we make lots and lots of mistakes. We go backward as often as we go forward. But slowly, generation after generation, humanity advances up the evolutionary scale to get closer and closer to the more ultimate truth and love in which we live and exist, is the thinking. So as the poet said in the inauguration, we are not broken, we are unfinished. And in some ways, process theology asserts that God also is unfinished. They don't use that term precisely so far as I know, but it says that divinity itself is in a constant process of change, of flux, of becoming more of itself. Divinity itself is willing to be changed by what it started. That is to say, we are free to create beloved community. As modern process theologian Robert Brazee says, God's dream for us is that we continually transform into more complete, intense, beautiful, and loving persons who desire this transformation for all creation. The possibility, the call, the dream, the vision that enters our being from the divine is both positive for us and for the common good. As an adult, I began to wonder if there was a God, but I wanted spiritual community. And I looked for a place that would honor spiritual searching, doubt, that would be, so to speak, a big sky of a church. I found Unitarian Universalism. I felt the call to ministry quite quickly, and in preparation for ministry in seminary and in the various practicums that candidates for Unitarian Universalist ministry go through, I began to reconstruct my theology that included my earlier, rather innocent and elementary views of the sacred, while also maturing those ideas to fit a more mature view of reality. I found in process theology, a philosophy that maintained a loving, available, present, persuasive, and persistent sense of the sacred that fit our modern view of the world. And more than just fit, it actually calls us to greater service in the world, since under this view we understand that we are the hands and feet, the eyes and ears of the sacred in the world, and it is our charge to build beloved community. For we have a presence and a power in us and in the world that is not of us, something good and beautiful and true. We are a theologically diverse religious tradition. We honor many ways of understanding ultimate reality, including those I've shared here this morning. And we are empowered by those differences. We learn from each other. We are interdependent. That in itself is a good process theology lesson. And it's an example, I think, of where we are as a nation right now, at this point in history, in between chapters in our national life. We are, all of us, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, facing a task of creating and co-creating a nation that works for our citizens and for all citizens, that is a beacon of light in the world, a beacon that has been dimmed in recent years. I loved what young Amanda Gorman said in her brilliant poem in the inauguration. We are broken. We are not broken. We are unfinished. Just as process theology asserts this unfinished quality about all creation, so are we now facing a nation that is unfinished and that calls us to work to co-create, to rebuild and build what must be done, whatever is needed as we journey forward. We will draw a star, a sun, a tree. In so doing, in the words of the poet laureate, we will rise, we will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. There is always light. We will co-create with that light to build a beloved community among ourselves and in the world. So may it be. Amen.
Holy, blessed, glory,
We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Again, my friends, remember, we haven't just been to church, we are the church. And when the church is the church, it is nothing more, it is nothing less, it is nothing other than a place in the world that rebuilds, reconciles, and recovers. Go in this week, in all you do, be the church. Go in grace. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to